the process for a medical separation? Hey, I am Chuck the bureaucrat, and I have been cautiously unraveling the rules and regulations that surround a medical retirement or a medical separation. You'll sometimes hear these things called Chapter 61 retirements because they're governed by U.S. Code Title 10, Chapter 61. And I say cautiously because this process is wild. It is thick with different pathways and a whole cast of characters and then all sorts of different outcomes that are dependent on your length of service and the severity of the condition you have. And then there are some unusual benefit calculations for service members who are determined to be unfit for continued military duty. In a lot of ways, those calculations are better, but then in some cases it seems like they might be worse. I want to cover all of that, but at the same time, I want to keep these videos short and concise and not get too bogged down in all of the details. With that in mind, the goal today is to focus on the skeleton framework of the process. It's just like any other military operation. It's important to know where you are and where you're going. So for today, we're just going to keep things simple. Now, what we're looking at is called the Integrated Disability Evaluation System, or ides. And it is important to know going in that an extremely high percentage of the people who are processed through ides are either separated or retired. What that means for you is that if you find yourself sucked into this process, begin planning for your separation or retirement immediately. Do not wait until the last bell sounds, or you'll find yourself with not enough time to take care of your affairs. Anyways, in addition to being set in U.S. Code, this process is governed at the DoD level by DoD Instruction 1332.18, and the Army has AR 635-40. So if you have specific questions, these are great references. But today, like I said, I just want to talk about the major steps in the process. Broadly speaking, there are three groups of people who will make determinations about your future, and each of them has a subcomponent of this process. Those are your unit commander and your installation retention office, the local medical community, and the Army-wide human resources community. And the reason I make this point is because in the broadest terms possible, this process is only going to have one of two outcomes. You will either be determined to be fit and returned to duty, or you will be determined to be unfit, and thus you'll be separated or retired. The medical community, well, they're the ones who make the initial determination that ushers you into the ides process. And there's a couple of points in the process where they can determine that you are fit to return to duty. But it is that Army-wide human resources community that makes that determination that you are unfit and therefore should be separated. Just between you and me, the more I learn about this process, the more I would trust no one. It's not that these are bad people, but none of them are fully in control of the outcome of the process. That means that you cannot trust any of the promises that they make. Trust only the documents that they have signed. Anyways, a soldier is referred to ides when they possess one or more of the disqualifying conditions listed in Chapter 3 of AR 40-501 with a permanent profile with a 3 or a 4 designation. Additionally, soldiers with a similar temporary profile that's been in effect for more than 365 days, well, they can get referred to ides. From there, the soldier falls under 365-40 for the remainder of the process. The first stop for most folks is the MOS Administrative Retention Review, or the MAR-2. The MAR-2 is an administrative process conducted by the unit commander and the Installation Retention Office to determine whether a soldier can be retained in their primary MOS or reclassified into another MOS. There are essentially three outcomes here: retain, reclassify, or refer for disability evaluation. Now, not everybody is going to go through a MAR 2. Officers within 12 months of their mandatory removal date, enlisted within 90 days of their ETS with no additional service obligation, general officers and folks who didn't complete initial entry training, well, they're all going to get handled differently. But once referred for disability evaluation, the soldier goes before a medical evaluation board, a MEB. This board consists of 2 or more physicians appointed by the local military treatment facility's commander. The main task of the MEB is to complete a medical narrative summary, often called a NARSUM. This NARSUM is really just a compilation of relevant information: diagnoses, treatment summaries, prognosis statements, competency statements. It's a file of the information that you would kind of expect doctors to consider in this kind of a situation. There are 2 outcomes for a MEB. The first is when the case file is forwarded to a physical evaluation board, a PEB, for fitness determination. This happens when the MEB finds that one or more of a soldier's medical conditions do not meet medical retention standards. Alternately, the MEB can recommend that the soldier be returned to duty if the MEB finds that all medical conditions meet retention standards. Now, in this very simple orientation we're doing today, I'm glossing over the fact that there are a lot of protections for the service member if they disagree with the MEB's recommendation. If you want to read more, I recommend that you look at chapters 4-13 through 4-15 in AR 365-40, and I'll lay out the details in an upcoming video. But all hand-waving aside, the next stop in the process is a physical evaluation board, or a PEB. This board has the purpose of determining a soldier's fitness, either for retention, separation, or retirement with disabilities under Chapter 61. What that means is that the PEB is really making administrative determinations that affect a soldier's benefits under law. Now, an interesting thing about the PEB is that each one is organized under the U.S. Army Physical Disability Agency. This agency is part of HRC and is led by a 1-star general. You see, if the Secretary of the Army is going to be held responsible for making the determination that a soldier is unfit for duty, well, she wants to make sure that it has the proper level of supervision. So there is a commanding general, and the president of every board is appointed by that commanding general. The president of every physical evaluation board is a trained and certified colonel with full-time duty at the Physical Disability Agency. And an interesting thing about these presidents is that they can be any branch except Medical Corps. Now, the president of the PEB is responsible for leading the staff and making sure that they're properly trained in the process. But the president does not have to preside over every single case. And I make this point because while there is oversight with a commanding general and a colonel, you might not actually ever see any of that oversight. In the end, the PEB forwards a host of determinations to the Physical Disability Agency about the fitness of the soldier to continue military service, whether or not the medical conditions were incurred or aggravated in the line of duty, whether medical conditions are permanent and stable, and the list goes on. And just as in the case of the Medical Evaluation Board, there are a whole host of protections to make sure that the soldier receives fair treatment. If you want more detail on that, it's in Chapter 4-22 through 4-27 of AR 365-40. But you've probably heard me say that fair is just a 4-letter word that starts with F, and that fairness is in the eye of the beholder. And so, one of the interesting things about the Physical Evaluation Board, and really the whole ides process, is that it seems to be designed to provide the greatest amount of fairness for like a soldier who doesn't want to be separated, and the greatest fairness for a soldier who just doesn't want to be dragged through too many flaming hoops on their way out the door. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that the process even allows for the soldier who changes their mind partway through the process. But the important point here is that a lot of the underlying complexity of this whole process really derives from an effort to be fair towards the soldiers who are being evaluated. The last major step in the process is final disposition by the U.S. Army Physical Disability Agency. As I mentioned, this agency approves disability cases for the Secretary of the Army and issues disposition instructions to the Transition Center for the soldier separated or retired for physical disability. The dispositions that the Physical Disability Agency can issue include permanent disability retirement, placement on the temporary disabled retired list, separation with disability severance pay, separation without entitlement to disability severance pay, revert to retired status with disability benefits, fit for duty, and for reserve component soldiers, a determination that they're unfit, but that their injury or illness was not incurred in the line of duty. Even at this point, there are a bunch of what I would call safety nets. These safety nets are protections against minor injustices that can happen as a result of the administrative process. I'm not going to go into them now, but I think it's an important upcoming video because I've met a lot of people who feel that they were hung out to dry only to discover that in fact they were just tangled up in one of these safety nets. So we did not cover much at all today, but we at least have a solid foundation to continue the discussion. If you've got specific questions, please let me know, because as far as I can tell, this is a spooky place to be, and I don't want anybody to feel lost or alone. And in the meantime, watch this video.